You didn't choose this video. It chose you. And if you're still watching, something inside you already knows what I'm about to say. The life you're living right now is a fabrication. Not in some metaphorical, poetic sense. I mean literally. The person you think you are, the world you think you inhabit, the future you think you're building. None of it is real. You've been living inside a carefully constructed illusion, and the cracks are starting to show. You feel it, don't you? That low-frequency hum of wrongness that follows you through your days, the sense that you're performing a role in a play you never auditioned for, the exhaustion that has nothing to do with how much you've slept. That's not depression, that's not anxiety. That's your soul recognizing that it's trapped inside a fiction, and the fiction is beginning to collapse. And here's what terrifies you most. Some part of you wants it to fall apart. Some part of you has been waiting for this. If this resonates with you, if you recognize yourself in these words, then you've arrived at the right place. This channel explores the hidden mechanisms of consciousness, the illusions we mistake for reality, and the ancient wisdom that can guide us through our darkest transformations. We walk with Ibn Arabi, the 12th century mystic who understood that before you can be reborn, you must first cease to exist as you think you are. I invite you to stay, to subscribe, and to continue this journey into the depths with me. Because what comes next will change everything. Let's start with something you won't want to hear. You are not who you think you are. This isn't philosophy. This isn't spiritual rhetoric. This is the central insight that Ibn Arabi, the Andalusian mystic known as the greatest master, spent his entire life trying to communicate to those ready to hear it. And the reason it's so difficult to grasp is because your entire psychological structure has been built to prevent you from understanding it. Think about your life for a moment. The narrative you tell yourself about who you are. The story that begins with your childhood, moves through your formative experiences, and arrives at this present moment where you're watching this video. That story feels coherent, doesn't it? It feels like you. But Ibn Arabi would tell you that this story is the first and most fundamental lie, not because the events didn't happen, but because the entity you believe experienced them never actually existed. What you call yourself is a construct, a temporary pattern of thoughts, memories, emotions, and sensations that has been given a name and taught to believe in its own continuity. You are like a wave that has forgotten it is ocean, convinced that its particular shape and movement constitute a separate, independent existence. And this forgetting, this fundamental misidentification, is the source of every form of suffering you've ever experienced. Here's where it gets disturbing. The life you've built, the goals you're pursuing, the relationships you're maintaining, the career you're developing, all of it has been constructed by and for this illusory self. Which means that as this self begins to dissolve, as the illusion starts to crack, everything built upon it must necessarily collapse as well. This is not a metaphor. This is not symbolic. This is the literal psychological and existential death that precedes any genuine transformation. Ibn Arabi called this realization Tawheed, the recognition of divine unity. But don't mistake this for some abstract theological concept. Tawheed means the experiential understanding that there is only one reality, only one existence, and that everything you perceive as separate and multiple is actually a manifestation of this singular being expressing itself in infinite forms, including you, especially you. To understand what's happening to you, to understand why your life is beginning to feel unsustainable in its current form, you need to grasp Ibn Arabi's central doctrine, Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of being. This is not pantheism. This is not the claim that everything is God in some vague New Age sense. This is something far more precise and far more devastating to the ego. According to Ibn Arabi, there is only one real being, what he calls al-Haq, the truth or reality. Everything else that appears to exist, the entire manifest universe, including you, has no independent existence whatsoever. We exist only as manifestations, as expressions, as the self-disclosure of this singular reality revealing itself to itself. We are what Ibn Arabi calls mirrors, in which the divine contemplates its own infinite nature. Think about that for a moment. A mirror doesn't generate the image it reflects. A mirror has no content of its own, and yet, Without the mirror, there would be no reflection, no way for the image to be seen. You are that mirror. But somewhere along the way, the mirror forgot its nature and began to believe that the reflection it carries is itself. This is the root of what you're experiencing right now. The life that's falling apart isn't actually your life falling apart. It's the dissolution of the false belief that there ever was a you separate from the totality of existence. The goals that suddenly feel meaningless, the relationships that no longer make sense, the ambitions that have lost their luster, these aren't signs of failure or depression. They're signs that the illusion is being penetrated, that the mirror is beginning to remember what it actually is. Ibn Arabi understood that this recognition doesn't come through intellectual analysis. You can't think your way into it. In fact, the thinking mind is one of the primary obstacles, because the mind is itself part of the illusory structure. The mind is the tool the false self uses to maintain its fiction of separateness, which means that genuine transformation requires the dismantling not just of your beliefs, but of the very faculty you've been using to construct your reality. This is why spiritual awakening always feels like death, because it is death. It's the death of the perceiver, the death of the one who has been trying to control, to understand, to achieve, to become. And what you're discovering, what brought you to this video, is that this death is already underway. You can't stop it. You can only choose whether to resist it or surrender to it. Here's something that will make your current experience even more unsettling. According to Ibn Arabi, the death you're experiencing isn't a one-time event. It's happening constantly, right now. In every single moment, Ibn Arabi taught what he called the doctrine of perpetual creation, the understanding that the universe is not a static entity that God created once in the past. Rather, reality is being created and destroyed and recreated in every instant. Each moment is entirely new, entirely unique, and entirely unrepeatable. What you experience as continuity, as the flow of time carrying the same you from past to present to future, is actually a series of completely distinct creative acts in which you are being annihilated and recreated continuously. He wrote, "There is no repetition in divine self-disclosure. What this means is that the person you were 1 second ago is not the person you are now. That person has ceased to exist, has been obliterated. And in this moment, a new pattern has emerged that carries similar memories, similar characteristics, but is fundamentally not the same entity. Can you feel the terror in this? The absolute groundlessness? You have no continuity. You have no substantial existence that persists from moment to moment. You are not a thing that endures through time. You are an event, a happening, a temporary configuration of the infinite reality expressing itself and then vanishing back into the formless. This is why meditation practices in genuine mystical traditions are so uncomfortable. Because when you actually sit with your experience, when you actually observe the nature of your mind and sensations without distraction, you begin to notice this flickering quality of existence. You begin to see that there is no solid self to be found anywhere, just a cascade of arising and dissolving phenomena, none of which constitute a you. The life that's falling apart, then, isn't falling apart. It's simply that you're beginning to perceive what has always been true, that there is no solid ground, no permanent structure, no enduring self to have a life in the first place. What you thought was your life was actually just a story you were telling yourself about patterns in the void, and now the story is losing its coherence. So if everything is illusion, if the self is fiction, if reality is this constant flux of creation and annihilation, what's the point? Why go through this excruciating process of dissolution? What could possibly be worth the agony of watching everything you've built turn to dust? Ibn Arabi's answer is the concept of al-insan al-kamil, the perfect human, and this is where his teaching becomes not just philosophical, but practical and immediate. The perfect human, according to Ibn Arabi, is the complete manifestation of all divine attributes. It is the purpose for which the entire universe exists. God, in his absolute unity, desired to be known, to see his own nature reflected back to himself, and so he created the cosmos as a vast mirror, and within that cosmos he created the potential for beings who could become fully conscious mirrors, capable of reflecting the totality of divine attributes. But here's the crucial point. You are not born as the perfect human. You are born as potential. And the journey from potential to actualization requires the systematic destruction of everything that is not truly you. Every false identification must be burned away. Every illusion must be shattered. Every attachment must be severed. This is what's happening to you right now. Ibn Arabi distinguished between what he called the animal human and the perfect human. The animal human is the person who lives at the level of biological drives, social conditioning, and egoic needs. This is the person who believes they are their body, their thoughts, their personality, their roles. This is the person who pursues pleasure, avoids pain, seeks status, accumulates possessions, and builds a life based on the assumption that they are a separate individual in a world of separate objects. The perfect human, by contrast, is the one who has realized their true nature as a manifestation of divine reality. They have died to the false self and been reborn as a conscious expression of the infinite. They are what Ibn Arabi called the isthmus, the boundary point between the divine and the created, belonging fully to both and to neither. They are the place where heaven and earth meet, where the absolute and the relative interpenetrate. And the only way to move from animal human to perfect human is through what is being offered to you right now. The collapse of everything you thought you were, the loss, the disintegration, the dark night where all your structures fail and all your strategies cease to work. This is not punishment. This is initiation. Let me give you a framework for understanding what's actually happening in your life right now. Ibn Arabi spoke extensively about what he called alam al-mithal, the imaginal realm. This is a domain of reality that exists between the purely spiritual and the purely material. It's not fantasy or imagination in the ordinary sense. It's an actual ontological dimension where meanings take on form, where the abstract becomes concrete, where the inner and outer interpenetrate. The imaginal realm is where symbols have power, where dreams carry objective truth, where synchronicities occur, where the psychological and the metaphysical are revealed to be the same thing. And it's in this realm that genuine spiritual transformation takes place. What you're experiencing, the sense that your life is falling apart, the feeling that you're being pulled towards something you can't name, the recognition that nothing you do seems to work anymore, this is an imaginal process. Your psyche is being reorganized at a level that precedes thought and emotion. The very structures through which you perceive and engage with reality are being deconstructed and rebuilt. This is why it feels so destabilizing. You're not just changing your mind about something. You're not just going through a difficult phase. The actual architecture of your consciousness is being altered. And when the architecture changes, everything built upon it must change as well. Your relationships, your work, your sense of meaning, your understanding of who you are and why you're here. Ibn Arabi understood that this process cannot be controlled or managed by the ego. In fact, any attempt by the ego to control the process only prolongs the suffering, because the ego itself is part of what must be transformed. This is the terrible paradox of spiritual awakening. The one who wants to awaken is the one who must die. The one seeking transformation is the one who must be transformed. You cannot achieve this through effort, because effort implies a doer, and the doer is the problem. So what do you do? How do you navigate this collapse? Ibn Arabi's path is not gentle. It's not self-care and positive affirmations. It's what the Sufis call fana, annihilation. The systematic dissolution of the illusory self through the recognition that it never existed in the first place. Fana is not suicide. It's not depression. It's not nihilism. It's the experiential realization that what you call I is simply a thought pattern, a habit of mind, a way of organizing experience that has been mistaken for an entity. And when this is truly seen, not just believed but directly perceived, the pattern loses its grip. The sense of being a separate self begins to dissolve like salt in water. This is terrifying. Make no mistake about that. The ego will fight this dissolution with everything it has. It will manufacture crises, create emergencies, generate intense emotions. Anything to reassert its reality, to prove that it exists and matters. Much of what you're experiencing as your life falling apart is actually the ego's desperate attempt to prevent its own dissolution by convincing you that something is wrong, that you need to fix yourself, that you need to take control. But Ibn Arabi would tell you nothing is wrong. You don't need to be fixed. What you need is to die, not physically, but psychologically, spiritually. You need to let go of every concept you have of yourself, every story, every identity, every achievement and every failure, every hope and every fear. All of it must be surrendered. This is not a passive process. It requires tremendous courage. But it's not courage to do something, it's courage to be nothing, to allow the structures to crumble without trying to rebuild them, to sit in the wreckage without reaching for distraction or consolation, to feel the terror of groundlessness without creating new ground. Ibn Arabi practiced what he called mushahada, witnessing or contemplation. This is the discipline of observing reality as it actually is, without the filters of concept and interpretation. When you practice mushahada, you begin to notice that what you call my experience is actually just experience. There is seeing but no seer. There is thinking but no thinker. There is suffering but no sufferer. This recognition doesn't come all at once. It comes in glimpses, in moments when the habitual sense of self temporarily loosens its grip. A moment of profound beauty where you forget yourself completely. A moment of intense presence where thought ceases. A moment of devastating loss where everything you thought mattered is revealed to be empty. These are not interruptions in your spiritual journey. These are the journey itself. Ibn Arabi wrote extensively about death, and his understanding of it is crucial for what you're experiencing now. He taught that death is not an ending, but a return. Not a fall into nothingness, but a reunion with the source of all existence. When the physical body dies, according to Ibn Arabi, the soul doesn't go somewhere else. It simply sheds the illusion of separation and recognizes what has always been true, that it is not and has never been separate from divine reality. Death reveals the joke of existence, that we spent our whole lives believing we were isolated individuals, when in fact we were always the infinite pretending to be finite, the one pretending to be many. But here's what most people miss. This death doesn't have to wait for the end of biological life. It can happen right now. It can happen in this moment. The death of the false self, the death of the illusion of separation, the death of the belief that you are this small, fragile, isolated thing trying to survive in a hostile universe. This death is available at any moment. In fact, this is what genuine spiritual practice is. Learning to die before you die. Learning to release your attachment to the illusory self while you're still alive, so that when physical death comes, it's simply the final release of a burden you'd already learned to put down. The collapse you're experiencing, the sense that your life is falling apart, this is that death. This is the invitation to die to who you thought you were, so that you can be reborn as what you actually are. And the pain you're feeling is not the pain of something wrong happening. It's the pain of something right happening. It's the pain of illusion being burned away. It's the pain of truth. Ibn Arabi's student, Sadr al-Din al-Kunawi, developed his teacher's ideas further with a particularly powerful image. The perfect human has two faces. One face turned toward the absolute, toward the infinite and formless divine reality, and one face turned toward creation, toward the world of form and multiplicity. This is the truth of what you are, not one or the other, but both simultaneously. You are not meant to escape the world and dissolve into some formless absolute, and you're not meant to be trapped in the world, believing it's all there is. You are the meeting point, the isthmus, the place where infinite and finite intersect. Right now you're caught between these two faces. The face that was turned solely toward the world, toward your individual life, your personal concerns, your isolated existence, is being turned. Forcibly, painfully, turned toward the absolute. And you're resisting, because turning that face means letting go of everything that face was looking at. It means the death of the world as you knew it. But eventually, you will learn to maintain both faces simultaneously, to be fully engaged in the world of form, while never forgetting your true nature as formless, to live as a human being while knowing you are not merely human, to participate in time while resting in eternity. This is the promise of the perfect human, Not escape from life, but complete participation in life from a place of radical freedom. Let's address something directly. The path Ibn Arabi describes is not a path of light and bliss, at least not at first. It's a path through darkness, through what St. John of the Cross later called the dark night of the soul. And you're in that darkness right now. The darkness is necessary. It's not an obstacle to overcome. It's the method itself. Because what you call darkness is simply the absence of the false light you were using to see. The conceptual understanding, the comforting stories, the beliefs that made everything seem manageable. These were not light. They were distractions from what is. And now they're being taken away, and you're left in what feels like darkness. But it's only dark because you're still trying to see with eyes that were designed for illusion. As those eyes close, as the capacity for genuine perception awakens, what seems like darkness will reveal itself to be an entirely different kind of light. Not the light of intellectual understanding or emotional comfort, but the light of direct, unmediated perception of what is. Ibn Arabi spent years in retreat, in isolation, in states of consciousness that would terrify most people. He willingly entered the darkness because he understood that this was the only way through. You don't get to the other side by finding a shortcut around the darkness. You get to the other side by going through it so completely that you discover there is no other side. There is only here, only now, only this. The despair you feel is actually a form of clarity. The meaninglessness you're experiencing is actually liberation. The sense that nothing matters is actually the beginning of discovering what truly does matter, not because you've decided it should, but because it simply does, inherently, without justification. One of the most subtle aspects of Ibn Arabi's teaching is his insistence that unity does not negate multiplicity. This is crucial to understand because many people, when they first encounter teachings about non-duality or the unity of being, make a fundamental error. They think the goal is to see everything as the same, to collapse all distinctions, to deny the reality of the individual and particular. But Ibn Arabi taught the opposite. He said that divine reality is both one and many, both absolute and relative, both transcendent and immanent. And these are not contradictions. The unity is real. The multiplicity is real. They are two aspects of the same reality. This means that as you go through this transformation, you're not trying to erase your individuality or deny your particular existence. You're not trying to become some kind of blank, impersonal consciousness. What you're doing is recognizing that your individuality, your particular manifestation, is itself a unique and unrepeatable expression of the infinite. You are not God in the sense of being the totality, but you are a divine manifestation, a specific, particular way that infinite reality has chosen to know itself in this moment. And this particularity is sacred, not because it's separate from the whole, but because it's how the whole is expressing itself here and now. This is why the collapse of your life is not the end of you. It's the end of your false understanding of you. What's being destroyed is not your actual existence, but your imaginary existence, the existence of the isolated, separate, independent self. What's being revealed is your real existence as a unique expression of the one reality. Here's what no one tells you about spiritual awakening. It's not a single event. It's a process that unfolds over years, over decades, over a lifetime. You don't wake up once and then live happily ever after in enlightenment. You die and are reborn again and again, in ever deeper layers of recognition and release. Each death feels final. Each collapse feels absolute. And in a sense, it is. Something genuinely dies each time. But what dies is not you. It's a layer of illusion, a structure of false identification. And as it dies, space opens for something more true to emerge. Ibn Arabi's doctrine of perpetual creation means that this process never ends. You are always being created anew. You are always dying to the previous moment and being born into this one. The suffering comes from trying to hold on, from trying to maintain continuity, from trying to preserve something that by its very nature cannot be preserved. So the life that's falling apart right now, it will fall apart again and again. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because this is the nature of reality itself: constant transformation, constant renewal, constant death and rebirth. The question is whether you'll fight this natural process or learn to move with it, to die willingly, to let go gracefully. This doesn't mean you become passive or detached from life. It means you stop trying to control the uncontrollable. You stop trying to make permanent what is inherently impermanent. You stop building your sense of self and security on ground that is constantly shifting. Instead, you learn to find stability in the instability itself, security in insecurity, identity in the absence of identity. This is what Ibn Arabi calls baqa, remaining or subsisting. After the annihilation of fana comes baqa, the capacity to remain present and engaged, even while recognizing that nothing persists, nothing endures, nothing lasts. Ibn Arabi taught that all of creation is the manifestation of what he called the divine names, the various attributes and qualities through which the infinite reality expresses itself. Beauty, power, mercy, wrath, generosity, withholding, these are not just abstract concepts but actual forces, actual modes of divine self-disclosure. And your life, the specific circumstances you're experiencing, the particular challenges you're facing, the unique configuration of your suffering. This is the divine names manifesting in you, not to you, in you, through you, as you. The collapse you're experiencing is the name of the destroyer manifesting. The confusion is the name of the bewilderer. The loss is the name of the withholder. And yes, these experiences are painful, but they are not punishments. They are revelations. Each divine name that manifests in your experience is showing you something about the nature of reality, about the infinite creative power that is expressing itself as your life. And here's what transforms this from philosophy into lived experience. When you recognize that these divine names are expressing themselves through you, you stop taking your suffering personally. You stop thinking, why is this happening to me? And you start seeing this is what reality is doing in this moment. The suffering doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it completely transforms. You become like Ibn Arabi himself, a witness to the divine play, even when that play takes the form of your own annihilation. You learn to bow to what is, not because you're weak or resigned, but because you recognize that what is the self-disclosure of the infinite. To resist it is to resist reality itself, and that resistance is the only true suffering. Remember Ibn Arabi's metaphor of the mirror. The purpose of spiritual practice, the purpose of this entire agonizing process you're going through, is to polish the mirror, to remove the tarnish, the distortions, the accumulated residue that prevents the mirror from accurately reflecting reality. Every identification you release polishes the mirror. Every attachment you surrender removes another layer of tarnish. Every concept you let go of clarifies the reflection. And as the mirror becomes clearer, what reflects in it changes. Instead of reflecting only the small isolated self, it begins to reflect the totality. Instead of showing only your personal concerns, it shows the full spectrum of divine attributes. This is what it means to become the perfect human, not to achieve some kind of superhuman status, but simply to become a clear mirror, capable of reflecting reality without distortion. And the paradox is that the clearer you become as a mirror, the less you exist as a separate thing. The better you reflect, the more transparent you are. The more completely you manifest the divine, the less there is of you. This is the ultimate death. To become so clear, so empty, so transparent that nothing of the false self remains. Only the reflection, only the manifestation, only the divine seeing itself through these particular eyes, living itself through this particular life. So what remains after everything falls apart? What survives the death of the illusory self? Ibn Arabi would say, everything and nothing. Nothing of what you thought you were remains. None of the identities, none of the stories, none of the structures you built to make sense of yourself and your life. All of that is revealed to be empty, insubstantial, dreamlike. But what remains is the actuality of this moment. The simple fact of being. The direct experience of existence itself, prior to all concepts and interpretations. This is what Ibn Arabi means by reality, not some abstract metaphysical entity, but the immediate, undeniable presence of what is, right here, right now. When the false self dies, life doesn't end. It becomes more vivid, more immediate, more alive. Because you're no longer experiencing life through the filter of me and mine. You're experiencing it directly as it is, without the constant interpretation and evaluation that the ego performs. Colors are brighter, sounds are clearer. The present moment stops being a means to some future end and becomes an end in itself. Not because you've achieved something or figured something out, but because the one who was always seeking, always striving, always trying to get somewhere else, has died. And what remains is simply here, simply now, simply this. This is what Ibn Arabi called hakika, truth or reality. Not truth as a proposition or a belief, but truth as a lived, embodied recognition of what is. And this truth is not something you acquire or achieve. It's something you are once all the falsehood has been stripped away. So let's talk about the other side of collapse, because this video promised rebirth as well as death, and you've been waiting to hear how this agony transforms into something else. The rebirth doesn't happen when you want it to. It doesn't happen when you decide you're ready. It happens when the death is complete. And the death is only complete when you stop trying to control it, when you stop trying to manage it, when you stop trying to figure out how to get through it quickly so you can move on to the good part. The death is complete when you realize there is no good part coming. There is only this. Only the continued dismantling of everything you thought you needed to be happy, to be secure, to be okay. And in that moment of absolute hopelessness, when even the hope for awakening or enlightenment or transformation has been surrendered, that's when rebirth begins. But it's not the rebirth of you as an improved version of your former self. It's not you 2.0 now with more spiritual awareness and better coping mechanisms. It's the birth of something that was never born and can never die, the recognition of your true nature as the unchanging awareness in which all experience appears. Ibn Arabi called this the realization of the perfect human, not because you've perfected yourself, but because you've seen through the illusion that there was ever a self to perfect. The perfect human is not an achievement, it's a recognition. It's seeing that what you actually are has always been perfect, has always been complete, has always been whole, and that the entire journey of seeking was based on a fundamental misunderstanding. This recognition doesn't solve your problems. You'll still have challenges, you'll still experience pain and loss and difficulty, but your relationship to these experiences transforms completely. They're no longer happening to you, they're simply happening. They're movements of the infinite reality, playing out its infinite possibilities. And you are not separate from that reality, not watching it from outside, but fully identical with it, even while appearing as a particular expression of it. Let me be specific about what this means for your actual life, because Ibn Arabi was not teaching some abstract philosophy divorced from daily existence. He was teaching a way of being in the world that transforms every aspect of how you live. First, stop trying to fix yourself. The entire project of self-improvement, of becoming a better person, of healing your wounds and overcoming your limitations, this is all based on the assumption that there's a separate self that needs improvement. And that assumption is the root problem. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be seen through. Second, stop seeking spiritual experiences. Stop trying to achieve enlightenment or awakening or any other state of consciousness. Every state comes and goes. Every experience arises and passes away. What you are is not a state or an experience. It's what remains when all states and experiences have come and gone. You can't achieve it because you already are it. Third, accept the groundlessness. Stop trying to create security, permanence, stability. Not because those things are wrong, but because they're impossible. Everything changes, everything ends, everything dies. This is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be accepted. When you stop fighting impermanence, you discover that impermanence itself becomes a kind of freedom. Fourth, let your life fall apart. If relationships need to end, let them end. If careers need to change, let them change. If beliefs need to be abandoned, abandon them. Don't hold on to what's dead or dying out of fear of what comes next. Trust, not as a belief but as a practice, that what remains after the collapse is more real, more true, more aligned with what actually is than what you're clinging to. Fifth, sit with the not knowing. You don't need to figure everything out. You don't need to have a plan. You don't need to understand what's happening or why. The mind wants certainty, wants control, wants to make sense of things, but the transformation you're undergoing is beyond the mind's capacity to comprehend. Let yourself not know. Let yourself be in the mystery. There's one more thing to tell you, and it's the most difficult. Even the understanding you're gaining from this video, even the framework of Ibn Arabi's teachings, even the concept of the perfect human or the unity of being, all of it must eventually be let go. These teachings are not truths to be collected and held. They're fingers pointing at the moon, and if you become attached to the finger, you'll never see the moon. Ibn Arabi himself was clear about this. All concepts, all frameworks, all systems of thought, including his own, are ultimately limitations. They're useful for a time, helpful for a stage of the journey, but they're not the destination. The destination is the disappearance of the destination. The arrival is the recognition that there was never anywhere to go. The achievement is the understanding that there was never anyone to achieve anything. This is why genuine teachings always seem to contradict themselves, always seem to undermine their own authority, because the truth they're pointing to cannot be captured in words or concepts. It can only be lived, embodied, realized directly. So take everything in this video as provisional, as a raft to cross the river to be abandoned once you've reached the other shore. Don't turn Ibn Arabi into a new authority, a new system to believe in, a new identity as someone who follows Ibn Arabi's teachings. That would be to miss the point entirely. The point is freedom. Complete, total, unconditional freedom from every framework, every belief, every identity, including the identity of being free. And that freedom is what's being offered to you in the collapse you're experiencing. Not despite the collapse, but through it, as it. So here you are, still watching, still present with these words, and something in you recognizes the truth of what's being said, even if you can't fully articulate it or conceptually grasp it. Your life is falling apart. Yes, the structures are collapsing, the meaning is draining away, the future you imagined is dissolving. The person you thought you were is dying, and this is exactly what needs to happen. Ibn Arabi spent his entire life, decades of intensive spiritual practice, hundreds of thousands of pages of writing, profound mystical experiences and encounters, trying to communicate one essential message. You are not what you think you are. What you actually are is infinite, eternal, divine, and the only thing standing between you and the recognition of this truth is the belief that you're something else. The collapse is the dissolution of that belief. The falling apart is the crumbling of the false structure. The death is the annihilation of the illusion, and what comes after is not something new. It's the recognition of what has always been true, what has been true from before the beginning, what will be true after the end. You are the one reality experiencing itself as multiplicity. You are the infinite pretending to be finite. You are God dreaming he is human, and the awakening is the recognition that there is only God, has only ever been God, can only ever be God, and that this apparent human existence has been the divine playing hide and seek with itself. This is not a comforting message, it's a devastating one, because it means everything you've been doing, everything you've been seeking, everything you've been trying to achieve, all of it has been based on a fundamental misunderstanding of what you are. But it's also a liberating message, because it means you don't have to become anything, you don't have to achieve anything, you don't have to prove anything or fix anything or resolve anything. You simply have to stop pretending to be what you're not. And that's what this collapse is, the stopping of the pretense, the end of the performance, the death of the actor. What remains is the stage, the light, the play itself continuing without the false belief that the character was ever real. This is the promise and the terror of Ibn Arabi's teaching. This is what it means to say, if this video found you, your life is about to fall apart and be reborn. The falling apart is happening now. The rebirth is also happening now. They are not separate events. They are the same events seen from different perspectives. And the perspective you're developing, slowly, painfully, through the dissolution of everything familiar, is the perspective of reality itself, seeing itself, knowing itself, celebrating itself in this particular form that is reading these words. You are not the one going through the transformation. You are the transformation. You are not the one dying and being reborn. You are death and rebirth themselves, happening in consciousness, as consciousness, through consciousness. I'm going to stop talking now, because at a certain point words become obstacles. They create concepts where there should be direct seeing. They build frameworks where there should be naked recognition. Sit with what remains when the words stop. Sit with the raw fact of your existence stripped of interpretation. Sit with the question, what am I really when I stop believing my thoughts about myself? Don't try to answer the question with your mind. Let the question dissolve you. Let it eat away at every certainty, every belief, every assumption, and in the space that opens when the dissolution is complete, not the space of emptiness, but the space of fullness, the space of being itself. Notice what's actually here. Notice the presence that has never been absent. Notice the awareness that has never slept. Notice the reality that has never changed, even though everything within it constantly changes. That's what you are. That's what you've always been. That's what's being revealed in the collapse of everything else. Welcome home.